The Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking about some stuff coming up on the horizon. 2 trailers that have recently launched, surprisingly after Comic-Con for some reason. And, in full spoilers, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We're going to start off with On the Horizon.
On the horizon. On the horizon.
On the Horizon is where we talk about stuff that's coming up in the next week or so. We only got a few things this time. Only Murders in the Building is returning on Hulu on Tuesday, August 8th. Strange Planet, which is an animated comedy from Dan Harmon, the creator of Rick and Morty, but also Community, and based on the webcomic of the same name by Nathan Pyle. Strange Planet is coming to Apple TV Plus on Wednesday, August 9th. Painkiller, it's a new miniseries based on the book of the same name that's about the opioid crisis. There was a similar show they did not too long ago, I think on Hulu, with Michael Keaton in it. And this is basically like the same story, but from a different angle, I guess. It's coming on Thursday, August 10th on Netflix. Then Heart of Stone, which is the new Gal Gadot spy thriller coming to Netflix, is on Friday, August 11th. As is The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which I don't know if you've seen the trailer for. I don't know if we discussed the trailer here, but it's basically Dracula
excellent.
on a boat.
Yeah.
It's Dracula on a boat. And it's got a Sir Davos from Game of Thrones is in it. But that's coming to theaters on Friday, August 11th. And that is our On the Horizon segment. So now let's move on to On Beat. On Beat is our news segment, and we're just talking about 2 trailers that came out that are very Comic-Con-esque trailers, but for some reason came out after Comic-Con, and so they qualify for this week instead of last week. And that is, we finally got a trailer for Castlevania Nocturne. Castlevania was, they announced it was coming to an end, and people were like, what? And then very quickly they said, oh, but there's going to be spin-offs.
Yeah,
there's going to be continuations. Basically, they were done with the current generation in the story. So as the Castlevania expert, tell us what to expect from Castlevania Nocturne.
It's going to be the origin story of Richter Belmont.
What games is Richter Belmont focused in?
Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. This is not like a retelling of those games. This is literally going to be an origin story for the character.
Okay, it is. So it's a whole different approach to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the first Castlevania series was mostly game-based, right?
Very loosely. It was like the first couple seasons was Castlevania 3. Obviously, followed that story closely. That's not a complicated story. And then the rest of it brought in elements from Curse of Darkness, but like didn't really follow the story of that game that closely. It was
a loose adaptation.
Yeah, you can expect the same thing from this.
Okay. So it's kind of the same thing, but like a different time period for the character before. We're seeing the character before what we've ever seen him in before, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we got a trailer for Loki Season 2, which, it's exciting. It's one of the best aspects of Phase 4 of the MCU. We get to see it back. It's right now, the unfortunate thing is it's heavily tied into the whole Kang storyline, which seems like it might or might not be kind of up in the air right now with the MCU, with everything that's going on.
I will say the trailer did look great, though. Loki is one of the bright spots of Marvel's.
Speaking of Ki Kwan appears in this trailer.
Yes, he does, yeah.
He's exciting. I love the part where like they're getting into like a space outfit or something, and he's like, oh, there's a hole in here, and he just slaps some duct tape on it. He's like,
yeah, all better. Oh yeah, that's fine. It looks fantastic. not much more to say about that.
It looks like they're getting a even more timey-wimey with this one than they did with the first one. So, and they don't have to introduce all those concepts again, which was a big part. The first show was there's a lot of just sitting around and talking.
It's a lot of world building, really.
Yeah, a lot of sitting around and talking until like the last couple episodes when you started getting more like show and less tell. And it looks like with this, we got a lot of that out of the way, so we might be able to kind of get straight into some crazy stuff. So I'm excited. It looks good. But that is it for our On Beat section. And now that leaves us with only our main topic for the night. Full spoilers. This episode, we are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I saw this a while ago. Will, you finally got to watch it. I know you've been excited for it.
Well, yeah, obviously.
What do you think?
I loved it. It's one of the best Marvel movies, best Marvel movie of this year, at least. I mean, that's a stupid thing to say. It's the only Marvel movie of this year.
Yeah, it's the best Phase 5 thing yet.
Yes, okay, yes. Because I'm trying to think. It gets so confusing, because, like, I don't want to say, like, because Spider-Man No Way Home, but, like, that's the last phase, right? So I can probably say this is the best Phase 5 film.
I think the last movie, the last thing of Phase 4 was Black Panther 2.
Okay, yeah. And,
so everything after
Ant-Man
Black Panther
was
2.
Phase 5, right?
We've had Ant-Man and the Wasp was the first thing of Phase 5, then Secret Invasion, then Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and then Secret Invasion. You're kind of seeing some of the stuff out of order just because you're not able to see it in theaters.
But it does not matter if...
I'm just saying that's making it more confusing for, like, trying to place where things
place
are.
it in phases, in their phase. Yeah, this is the best Phase 5 Marvel project so far, even though there's, like, only
It's the only good one so far.
Yeah, it's the only good one so far.
So, in a sense, that's not saying much, but even taking that qualifier out, I think this is like it's a really high up Marvel movie.
This is a fantastic movie. I still think Guardians 2 is a stronger film.
See, we're on completely different pages of that, because I think Guardians 1 is way better than Guardians 2.
Yeah.
I think this might be better than Guardians 1.
Yeah. This is better than Guardians 1, in my opinion. As far as I'm concerned, the first movie is like the weakest. But I mean, that's not because the first one was at all bad. It's just because James Gunn has this amazing talent for like topping himself each time. Even though I think overall 2 was stronger, I feel like, man, this movie...
We disagree on that one. Like, I think 2 was the worst of the bunch, but
this movie has all the elements. Focusing in on Rock as like the emotional core of the movie.
I knew this would be a good strength for James Gunn because he's such a animal lover.
Yes.
He's constantly posting like pictures of him with like ferrets and other weird animals and going to like zoos and getting backstage things where he's able to like spend time with different animals. So, he's like heavily invested in like animal advocacy and stuff. So
yeah,
a storyline like this is going to be something that's very personal to him.
Yeah, this is definitely like very much an animal advocacy story, especially like because you have the villain experimenting on animals. Animal experimentation is something that happens in reality. And it's terrible, and it kind of like hammers home how awful it is.
Yeah, this is a condemnation of animal cruelty and animal experimentation. It's very good, and now that we've established that we both love it, let's shit on it.
Let's shit on it. Yeah.
Let's get it out of the way so we can spend some more time at the end talking about the strengths of the movie. Let's talk about some of the weaknesses first to get them out of the way.
Okay.
You got something to start, or do you want me to kick off? Okay, I'll kick off.
You first.
One thing I remember, and it had more of an impact on me the first time I watched it than the second time, so I guess that shows that the negative effect, like, lessened for me, is that, like, there's a lot of like character deaths that aren't like major significant ones that are just kind of so swept under the rug in a way that didn't sit right with me. In particular, Counter Earth and the complete destruction of that. And just met this family that like took in the Guardians and were kind to them and everything. And then they're just gone. They're just wiped out. And it seems like nobody cared. Like,
Yeah, like nobody even takes a moment to reflect. And I think that's a byproduct of...
I think it's just
it's a byproduct of the pacing, yeah. Stuff's going on. We need to keep it rolling. So there's no time to reflect on what just happened.
Yeah, but I just think about that cute, I think it was like a goat child that,
Yes.
rolled the ball to Drax and got hit in the head quickly, and that whole situation was kind of funny and interesting and stuff. Now that little child is dead. That family that like the Bat people that took them in, and when everybody else was freaking out and let them use their car and were able to communicate and help them out, where Drax kept trying to sleep on their couch or lay down on their couch.
Yeah.
That family, all dead. And then you even have the character that was introduced in the last movie, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, of Aisha, who's the head of the Sovereign and Adam Warlock's mother. They just killed her off kind of like almost haphazardly. She was in this movie and then only like in a few scenes, and it just shows that she's kind of desperate and under the thumb of the High Evolutionary, and then she's dead. And it's a victim of the pacing of the movie, which is, it's one of those things where it's like, if they factored all of that stuff in, if they were able to kind of properly address all of these things that we're talking about, it could have hurt the movie more than it helped it. But it still feels off. I think that's kind of my biggest complaint when it comes to this movie.
Yeah, no, it's a legitimate complaint. It does feel a bit off, but at the same time, it's a minor thing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it didn't affect my opinion of the movie that much.
Did you have any negatives that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Adam Warlock in this movie, the way he's portrayed.
I think I like Adam Warlock. I just feel like he feels like he's kind of shoved in.
Well, I
like the actor.
I wasn't quite jiving with, like, the portrayal, but, like, what they did at the end with his turnaround and then him realizing the value of friendship, I guess, to get, like,
or second chances, I guess.
Or second chances, yeah. And then him becoming Guardian was, like, a nice growth arc for the character, even though, like, it's pretty minor.
Yeah, I think he's a funny character. I think Will Porter did a good job portraying him. I think all of that stuff works. I think the problem with his character is it feels about half shoehorned in.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like half of it really works and half of it feels like it was just crammed in. It feels like maybe we should have gotten an extra 20 minutes, to maybe understand his arc a little bit better. And that's not there, unfortunately. Maybe it's in one of the deleted scenes. Who knows? There's a few deleted scenes that have floated around out there, but I don't think there's too terribly much with Adam Warlock that wasn't already in the movie. Yeah, I think that was an issue. It's one thing that I thought was going to be an issue as I watched the movie, like critically and analyzing the movie. I thought, is this an issue? Like, is this something that's bothering me? And I decided it wasn't. Is that the lead up to the movie heavily implied that there were going to be significant deaths in the movie. That we were going to lose some characters. We saw all the scenes in the trailer of characters screaming because somebody was almost dying.
That was marketing. And I kind of knew, intuitively, that James Gunn wasn't going to go there with this movie, because unless there's like a really strong narrative reason for it, it's a cheap and easy way to go to elicit like shock and like emotions and stuff.
Even besides the marketing, though, like there are scenes in the movie that set up like something's going to happen. Yeah. There's a scene where it looks like Drax is going to be killed.
Yes, very
for
early
example.
On.
Of course, Rocket through most of the movie is unconscious and at death's door, basically. But there's a lot of stuff, and then there's that scene with Peter towards the end where it looks like he's going to die. And a lot of that set up, as I was watching it, I had to like think outside of myself. I had to like think besides how I'm feeling about the movie. I had to like actually think about it and say, is the fact that like nobody major died in this movie, that's like none of the big characters died, is that a problem? Because this is the end of the trilogy and stuff. And like a part of me thought, like, even going into the movie, that if somebody didn't die, it would be a problem. That this would be a bad move, that it would show that the stakes were too low, everything like that. But what I decided upon after finishing the movie is that I was able to hit all those beats, all of the anxiety of the danger that the characters were in, all of the kind of sadness of a character departing in that way was still addressed by the characters departing in a different.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. I came into it with a different opinion than you. I came into it thinking they kill off like a major character just because this is the end. I was going to say, that's lazy. That's a Joss Whedon tactic. That's like killing off Quicksilver for no reason. Just to have that shocking moment.
It's something that's kind of expected for like a movie like this, where it's it's the last one. And so
Yes.
it's kind of like, when I realized that none of the major
And I'm
characters were gonna die, I was asking myself, is this bad? Is it bad that none of the characters are gonna die? And I said,
my
you know what?
answer
I
is-
still got the emotional response I needed. So
Right.
they didn't have to die because I
My
got the
answer is
emotion I
no,
needed.
because endings don't have to involve death. Death
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be the definitive, oh, we're ending this, so now everybody needs to die. It doesn't need to be that way. And I think this hits better at the very end of the film, at the very end of the credits. There's this post-credit scene with Peter living with his grandfather and just enjoying a normal life. And it's a very simple scene. It doesn't set up anything for a future, even though they have the big Star-Lord will return. It's not a setup for anything. It's just a very simple scene. And again, we point to earlier where it looked like Peter Quill was going to die. We wouldn't have got that scene if he died. And I think that scene hit more emotionally than any Peter Quill death scene would have hit. It's just better for it.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I think that character deaths are important. Like, they have to happen to show certain strength. Sometimes they feel forced and they don't necessarily work. Sometimes they feel necessary and they do work and they're integral to the movie working. I think because this was the last James Gunn Marvel movie, because he had signed on to DC at that point, and we knew this was the last thing he was doing for Marvel, and because it was the last of the Guardians trilogy, and because we cared so much about these characters, because there were so many characters too that have built up over the 3 movies, it felt like a death was necessary, like it was required for this story to kind of like leave on a strong footing.
It wasn't.
And I don't think, I'm saying it felt like it was, you know, but like after you finish the movie and like kind of look back upon it, I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel like a death was necessary with what they were able to set up. I think the characters going their own way kind of replaced that, because it was kind of a death of a team in a sense.
Also, very, very specifically, they did this in the last movie already. They killed off a major character, had a very emotional send-off that worked narratively for the story, that hammered home one of the core themes of the story they were telling in part 2, and it was fantastic. And if they did that again, it would just feel like, in this instance, it would feel like going back to that well to try and get the same reaction, the same emotions out of the audience. It would just feel like they're repeating themselves. And I think there is a lot of tendency in sequels, especially sequels to popular movies, to just repeat what worked in the first one, to do the crowd-pleasing moments over again. And that's why a lot of sequels feel stale or feel inferior. And I think James Gunn resisted doing that here, like by not having that big moment with a major character dying, and having that emotional moment again. Like, he resisted just repeating beats from the previous films.
So that's the thing, is that there's still a sense of grief and mourning in this movie, but it's not for like a person's life lost. It's for change. Because when things change in life, we grieve those changes. You might like have a fight with a friend and then you're no longer friends with this friend. That's something you're going to grieve even though nobody died, You're still going to grieve that.
You see it at the end. You see it with Drax, when Mantis says she wants to go explore on her own, and find herself. And Drax, he wants to go with her, and she tells him no. And, you see the grief on his face that he's going to have to be separated from Mantis, and he clearly doesn't want to be.
Well, it's that whole scene, everything when that happens, there's multiple, because there's also when Peter Quill gets the group together, and then we never see him tell them that he's going on his own. It cuts to Rocket saying, "So you're leaving?"
Yes.
And the idea there is that's Rocket grieving for Peter leaving the group and stuff, but it's about new beginnings. It's not all grief. There's also kind of the idea of like, yeah, but you're going to be a great leader, and this is the next iteration of the Guardians, and you're going to be the leader of this group. And like, so there's like this sense of like hopefulness and stuff that's there as well as the grief of just losing something that we're used to and something that we know. And it doesn't need to result in a character dying. We don't have to have a character dying to have that emotional response. And we were able to get that. That being said, there are some key deaths in this movie, but they're not relevant to the franchise having built up to this point. They're relevant only within the movie. And I'm mainly speaking about a third of this movie is in flashbacks. To everything that happened to Rocket. And in those flashbacks, we don't really have Rocket for most of the movie interacting with the main group. Most of what we're seeing him in is in these flashbacks where you see him with
his origin story.
His fellow animals turned sentient life forms by the High Evolutionary, Lila, Teefs, and Floor. And we get to know these characters and care about these characters. We get to see how much Rocket cares about these characters, how important they are to him. And we do have those characters die.
Oh, yeah. And again, this goes into, this is necessary for the story. This is those characters dying is necessary to explain Rocket's own personal trauma and also to demonstrate the cruelty of the High Evolutionary.
Mm-hmm. You know, in a sense, like just talking about this as we're going through it makes me even more positive about James Gunn doing Superman.
Yes.
Because what I'm getting from this movie, as we're talking about it, it's kind of like, it's something that already occurred to me, but it's like, it's strengthening in my mind as we're talking about it, is that I think the theme of this movie really is that there is a sense of like hope, that it's like these characters are all messed up and they've all had really bad things happen to them in their past. And they're facing very dangerous people that cause these very bad things to happen. But the key thing that this whole movie is about, this is a group that's growing, that's become strong, that's become powerful. And I don't just mean like with superpowers or something.
No, I mean, they become
just think
powerful.
about the progression of them as a group. Like in the first movie, they were just a bunch of outcasts that were came together in a prison to break out of a prison, like from like very low sources. In this third movie, they're in control of a Celestial's head. They have like, besides the main Guardians team, there's like a group of people that work for them that's probably about 100 plus people.
Yeah, the Ravagers.
Yeah, or it's not even just Ravagers. I mean, there's all these people that live in nowhere.
Yeah, in
like
nowhere.
Howard the Duck, you know? Like
oh, yeah, Howard the Duck. Like,
there's all these, there's this extended group of people. There's the Ravagers that had, joined him, like Kraglin, of course. There's the dog that they got Howard the Duck and the dog, I guess, from the collector when they bought the place.
Yeah.
And we see how important Cosmo is and how powerful she is. You see, like, there's whole groups of people they're playing poker with that weren't even Ravagers. They're just other people that are, like, moved to this planet. And then by the end of the movie, after the big conflict and everything, they've now taken on all of the Star Children that are joining them, and they have just so many people have now joined them that they've become this like really powerful force. They're not just this ragtag team.
I mean, it's a found family story.
Yeah.
The concept of family has always been, and what that means has always been a central theme of the series.
Not just that, but I mean, it's a central theme of basically what James Gunn has done since he's been making comic book movies, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, not his old horror movies, obviously, but like, if you look at even the stuff he's done at DC now, like Suicide Squad had that as well, and so does Peacemaker has that is a major theme as well.
Yeah.
And it's just something that James Gunn happens to be exceptionally good at. And, so there's this like sense of hope with everything coming together, with the idea of like, I remember somebody saying they were arguing against Man of Steel and the fact that Superman killed Zod in it. And the idea was basically Superman doesn't kill. And it's like, well, but if he didn't kill, then those people would have died by Zod's laser eye, so he had to kill him. And they're like, well, that's only within the situation that the movie brought up, because the whole point of Superman that Man of Steel missed is that Superman finds a way to stop that from happening. Right. Superman isn't a story about him doing his best as the entire city is destroyed and millions of people die. Superman is a story of him finding a way so that that doesn't happen. And it's about the hope of knowing not just that he's going to try really hard, but that he's going to succeed because he cares and because, he just will. He's the symbol of hope. And I think that in a sense, James Gunn has shown that he can tell that kind of story with this, and the fact that we didn't have to have major character deaths in the present. We have them in the past, in the flashbacks, but in the present we don't have them because the Guardians made it work. They did it. They were successfully got past the obstacles and were able to save everybody, and then that's a story of hope. And so that makes me think that Superman is even in better hands than I thought it was before.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I'm very much looking forward to this new Superman movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but yeah, overall, I thought this movie was great. the actor for Peacemaker, who plays the High Evolutionary. Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce his name.
No, I'm
just going to fuck it up.
yeah, I'm just going to mess it up. Yeah, I do apologize. But,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. He was a really great villain. The movie has, like, all the things you expect from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's got the humor. I really like the story arc between Peter Quill and Gamora in this, and
I like the way it took a mature thing. It wasn't about them getting back together. It was about Peter moving on from that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it touched on the concept of grieving, right? Peter has the scene with Gamora early on where he's kind of almost begging her to just be the Gamora he remembers. And that's just because, he is grieving the loss of that relationship. Mm-hmm. Even though she's clearly trying to tell him, she's not that person. And and you get to the end of the movie and Peter has come to terms with and accepted that.
It's happened both ways, which is interesting, because they didn't have one conform to the other. It wasn't like Peter conformed to Gamora's point of view, and obviously it wasn't Gamora conforming to Peter's point of view. They both changed as characters, or they both adapted. Peter moved past and recognized Gamora as a different Gamora. He recognized that was not his Gamora and that wasn't going to work. So he was able to move on in that way. But Gamora at the same time, the things that Peter brought out in her that made her a better person in the past movies and stuff before she died, all of that kind of comes into play for her because of her interactions with Peter and with the Guardians here. One thing that I think didn't even necessarily have to do with Peter, but was really good, is that through the movie, you see everybody can understand Groot.
Yes.
And, he always says, I am Groot. And she's like, yeah, I've heard your fucking name, stop saying your damn name every time. And everybody's like, no, he's saying that. And they're like, you're making this shit up, blah, 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 and everything. The end of the movie, he says, I am Groot to her, and she just responds as if he had said something else. And then there's a moment where it dawns on her oh, I understand. And then he says, I am Groot again, and she responds, and it's a really sweet moment that shows that she was able to bond, and they follow that up, of course, with the I love you guys line from Groot.
Yeah.
Which means that now we understand.
Now Groot. We can understand Groot, which was really
so when
cool.
Groot says I am Groot, now we actually hear what Groot says instead of I am Groot.
Right.
So that's it's really cool that they were able to do that in that way, where they kept a development for both characters. They didn't have one kind of conform to the other one's position. It wasn't like, Peter's right, you had become a better person, so now you need to become a better person and be with Peter again. And it wasn't Gamora's right, she doesn't need to be with Peter. She doesn't need to be the person she used to be. It's like, she doesn't, but she needs to not be who she is now. She needs to grow, and she did.
Yeah, exactly. It was really nice. Again, the way they handled that.
Let's talk about Cosmo.
Yes.
So Cosmo was just kind
of
just a gag character in the first Guardians, where we just saw it literally was just there.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say gag character so much. More of a reference, right? It was a reference, just like Howard the Duck at the end of the movie was a reference.
Yeah,
they weren't really in the movie.
They're both kind of gag characters. They're both there so that we see him and go, oh, that's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. It was just like a cameo. It was nothing else.
It was there to say, oh, I understand that reference. It was like,
yeah, that's it. And then we heard that they had cast for the part of the dog, and it's like, oh, how is this going to play? And then we saw the Christmas special, and we're like, oh, okay, she's like part of this team on Nowhere. She's not part of the main Guardians team, but she's part of the team on Nowhere, and so she's part of this group. And
because
stuff.
They purchased the Collector's Collection, which she was a part of the Collector's Collection along with Howard the Duck previously, and now that the Guardians purchased that, apparently she's part of the Nowhere group now.
Yeah, so it's like we got to see how she's incorporated in with the group, and we got to see that Kraglin, who is becoming more and more of a part of the group in the second movie, is now, he's still not part of the main Guardians. Well, at the end he is in the new iteration, but he still wasn't part of the main Guardians group, but he was a big part of Nowhere, and he was basically like Cosmo's partner. And so they had what was a really funny but also a really kind of cute relationship between the two, in which Kraglin, in his frustration, frustration of not being able to use his weapon in the way that Yondu was able to. And basically being mocked for it and struggling with that. He kind of lashes out at Cosmo by saying, "You're a bad dog." And you see, it's very much the idea of like the way a dog would react, you know, that's like the worst thing you could possibly say.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And it becomes this kind of like cute thing between them up until the end and the moment of acknowledgement of, you know, she's a good dog. And then like, I knew you thought I was a good dog. And it's just like a really cute kind of story between them. And that's, I think there's just a lot of that in this movie. There's a lot of like little cute stories that are like kind of maybe happening in the background or that aren't even really fully acknowledged or that just kind of are implied exist. Part of that is that, you know, when they rescue all the Stargirls, one of the post-credit scenes, you see like the new Guardians group and Adam Warlock's there and a much larger Groot is there and Rocket is leading the team. But then another character that you see is this character of Phyla, who is one of the Star Children, who apparently has some powers and is on the new Guardians team. And just having this character that we had seen previously be rescued in there, it creates this implication of like the family units that exist on Nowhere and how people kind of get involved and crossed with each other and become part of these different groups. And I mean, you could see it when Nowhere joined the fight at the climax of the movie and joined in and was helping them and how they took on all the refugees. This is like this big family unit that they came in as the backup. I really dug all of that. I think that that's something James Gunn is particularly good at.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Trying to think if there's anything else we really need to cover. We talked a bit about the High Evolutionary as a villain.
Yeah. I think we covered it all.
Nathan Fillion was fun.
Yeah, the Nathan Fillion cameo was great.
It's all I have one of those.
I have, yeah. Oh god, he says it like twice too. He's like, yeah, I have one of those.
It's funny because at first it's in reference to Drax. Because he's like, oh, he's like the owner's like nephew or something. And he's like, I have one of those.
And the second time it's,
Adam
in
Warlock.
reference to Adam Warlock. When he's talking to, Adam Warlock's, Aisha. You know, he's like, yeah, I have one of those. That's a great gag. Yeah, he has a fun cameo. Obviously, Sylvester Stallone has a brief cameo at the end, reprising his role from Guardians 2.
Yeah, so same thing with Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
Who was also on Sylvester Stallone's crew.
Yeah.
And we got a cameo for Yondu as well. A moment of motivation for Kraglin.
Yeah, Kraglin, because Kraglin sees the vision of Yondu, and that gives him, like, the push he needs to start being able to control that weapon. Which is a really, really cool scene, by the way. Really great scene for a really great character moment for Kraglin.
Mm-hmm. Where he gets to kind of go from being kind of just almost a joke character to like, you know, somebody that's actually a functioning member.
Yes.
It's funny also in the post-credits scene where it shows the new Guardians group, you know, when the threat starts approaching, because they're just kind of hanging out and talking, and then the threat starts approaching, and he's like, I could take care of this by myself if you guys just want to.
If you guys just want to chill.
Yeah. It's very much like the idea of like, he's always been kind of like a loser that has just kind of tagged along and not really been all that useful. And now that he's useful, he's just so excited.
Now he's got some swagger for the first time, and so he's going to just be overly obnoxious with that.
It's obnoxious, but at the same time, it's like he's just so happy that he can finally help. He's so happy that he can finally actually be of use, you know? So it's a cute moment.
I don't know, like, what Guardians 4 would look like without James Gunn's involvement, but man, do I really want to see a movie with this team now.
Yeah. I think what you do is you can't try to get somebody who's exactly like James Gunn, but you have to get somebody who has similar strengths, but in a different way. You know, like, you have to have somebody who's good at ensemble. You have to have somebody who's good at the kind of the message of found family, and everything else has to basically be different. You know, you need those two blocks though as a foundation to do a Guardians movie correctly. Because if you're going to be using these same characters, then you still need that kind of the idea of found family needs to still be a big part of it. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with that. Hopefully they do something good. It looks like some of the problems that Marvel was having through Phase 4 and the beginning of Phase 5 are hopefully resolving with, you know, Marvel having a bit more quality control than they were doing then. They were just putting out too much stuff, and I think they just had no quality control at that point.
Yeah.
And I think that's the answer to that is just to kind of slow down a little bit and
exactly. Slow
take
down,
a firmer grasp and
refocus, you know. Slow down the content output, make sure everything has a purpose. Playing out, like, what you want to achieve with the MCU in, like, the next, like, few years. And just make sure you have a focus. That's what they need to do.
Yeah, I think maybe the multiverse thing didn't work out quite as well as they wanted to. And the fact that, like, everybody was doing multiverse at the same time, not just DC, but just so many different things were doing multiverse. At the same time, basically, like, took it from being, like, a huge spectacle that they would own to something that, like, everybody's doing.
Also, funny enough, paradoxically, I don't think Marvel has really done anything with it. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was moving through a bunch of inconsequential multiverses.
Hopefully Marvel can find their footing again. Like I said, I think part of why Phase 4 is looked down on so much isn't necessarily because nothing in Phase 4 was good. I think there's probably more good stuff in Phase 4 than there is in Phase 1. But there's a lower percentage. Because Phase 1 only had, 5 movies in it total? Or 6 movies, I think, maybe. Right? It was the first 2 Iron Man movies, Thor, Captain America, Hulk, and then Avengers. That was Phase 1. Yes. So it was like 6 movies, right? You have the 4 individual movies. Iron Man had 2. Avengers 6.
Yeah.
So there's probably more good stuff in Phase 4 than Phase 1, as I said. But because there's so much stuff in Phase 4, it looks like there's less. Because, I mean, if you look at it, it's like, I think Black Panther 2 is as good as anything in Phase 1, probably. Shang-Chi is as good as anything in Phase 1, probably, you know? It's like, there's the, Spider-Man No Way Home is as good as anything in Phase 1.
Obviously. Yeah.
It's like, there's enough there. I think WandaVision is as good as anything in Phase 1, in my opinion. I think it hits emotionally harder than anything in Phase 1. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, right there, you're getting to that point. You're seeing it's like, there's a lot of good stuff in Phase 4, but there's just so much stuff that percentage is lower. It's the whole, like, total versus per capita argument, you know?
They just need to cut the chat.
Yeah.
We don't need the Phase 4. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We don't need that much content.
Yeah.
We don't.
I think we need like maybe 2 or 3 things a year. And that's not movies, that's things, you know?
Right.
A year is probably good. That's probably good output. Maybe 2 big Marvel movies and a series. And then the next year, maybe 2 series and a movie, you know? Like you just kind of jump back and forth between those 2. And then you have some specials here and there, and that's good. That works.
Yeah.
The problem is that I think one year we had something like 6 projects in 1 year. It was like, it's too much. You're overwhelming. You're just doing too much stuff now.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Well, that is it for our discussion, and that is it for this week's podcast. Next week, we are going to be talking about the first 4 episodes of Justified City Primeval, which is on FX now. You can watch that on Hulu as well. And
yes,
so we're going to cover the first 4, and then we're going to cover the last 4 later down the line once they've all aired. So that's what we'll be discussing next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. That'll be it for the week. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go to the container story for any of our podcasts on our website, you go to our website, totalscreen.com, find a container story, on-screen episode 104, 105, whatever. You click on that link, you'll find not just the actual episode, but you'll also find all of the relevant links you need for all of our social accounts and everything else, our RSS feed for the podcast. All of that is there. You can also subscribe to our podcast through your favorite podcast client of choice. So if you're using Apple Podcasts to listen to your podcast, just look us up there and hit subscribe, and you'll be getting our episodes as they come out that way as well. And all of our content is available on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. All of our entire backlog of our podcasts. The old podcast we did before this podcast is also all there. It's all available, so you can check that out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the On-Screen Podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.